They never knew what they were creating when they laughed at a 6-year-old girl. We were touring the bridge of a large cargo ship when the captain said it. He was a large German man in uniform, laden with gold braids. He threw back his head and laughed. "It is bad luck for women to go to sea," he said, "and there will never be women sea captains." He didn't say it like it was an opinion. He said it like it was a rule. All the other adults laughed too, all except one. My mother didn't laugh. She looked at him, then she looked at me. She never said anything out loud that day. She didn't have to. A knowing look passed between us. We knew something that Captain didn't. Not only did she know something, I saw the doubt in her eyes as she looked at this heavily bearded, tipsy man. The invitation to dine with the officers of this ship had been extended to our family in memory of friendship with Captain Washington Jefferson Frisbee, most fondly known to us as Cappy. My mother sized this man up as one who was ordered to invite us. She looked at him with serious doubt that the man who raised her orphan mother would ever consider such a vulgar man as his friend. I didn't argue with him. I didn't cry. I said it before I understood what it would cost. I will be a captain. The words came out of me fast and solid, like they'd been waiting their turn. I was standing at the helm when I said it, my hands wrapped tight around the large wooden wheel, so tight my knuckles went white. I remember stomping my foot without thinking, not in anger, in certainty. The captain laughed again, even louder this time, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. My mother was. She saw my hands on that wheel. She saw my shoulders square. She saw something settle. She didn't correct me. She didn't smile. She didn't tell me to lower my voice. She just watched. Later, I would understand that moment better. Children don't make declarations like that unless something older is already holding them up. But that day, all I knew was this. I didn't answer him. I answered myself. I never dwelled on the idea. There was no planning, no imagining how it would happen. It was as if it already was settled, as if something had been named and naming it was enough. That was our last trip on a White Star ship, but it was far from our last trip to the Alabama State docks. Nearly every weekend, our grandfather, Pawpaw, he gathered up the family for a Sunday drive. We'd head down to the docks. We'd watch the men unload the bananas. My brothers and I walked the creosoted bulkhead boards like they were balance beams. We knew better than to look straight down. The broken stubs of old pilings jutted up from the water where ships had torn them in half, jagged, sharp, like giant spikes waiting below. That danger, it kept us leaning towards the shore. But the smell of those docks, the creosote, the bananas, the salt carried on brackish water where Mobile Bay meets the river, that smell never left me. It still lives deep in my memory. Now, Cappy was never far from us either. My mother and Mammy, her mother, quoted him often. Not his lessons, just the way some words stay in a family. When summer came, we loaded 2 or 3 cars with provisions, pets, and people. We drove through the tunnel under the Mobile River, paid the quarter toll, and kept going, all the way to Gulf Shores. Now, skies at the beach or out on the water tell you their plans if you know how to look. I remembered Cappy's sayings. When you see mares' tails and mackerel scales in the sky, a change in the weather is coming in the next 24 hours. And when you wanted to know what was coming, he'd say, face into the wind, look over your right shoulder. The weather you saw there off in the distance, that's what's coming for you. But for me, there was no distance, no horizon, nothing I could see coming at all. I had learned how to read the sky, but no one teaches you how to read people when you are still learning how to stand. I mistook speed for safety. Childhood gave way to adulthood without the courtesy of a horizon. I was married before I understood what staying meant. I left school because staying felt dangerous. I earned my GED because leaving was the only motion available. Nothing announced itself as wrong. It just moved, too fast to question. I thank the heavens for one quiet mercy. My mother and Mammy had taught me enough etiquette to know my manners, to set a formal dining table, to stand without shrinking. Those lessons gave me footing when very little else did. That footing carried me to a job where the water sat just outside the windows of the Grand Hotel. Passing through its gates felt like crossing a threshold into something familiar. Past visits, family traditions, a remembered order. In the middle of a raging storm, it became my lightning rod. I was hired as a waitress. I wasn't old enough that I was married, and in those days that seemed to answer questions no one bothered to ask. There was no I-9, no careful verification. They took me at my word, and I stepped into that dining room as if I belonged there, because I did. The Grand Hotel sat with the bay just beyond its windows, steady and wide, and passing through its gates felt like crossing into something familiar. I had been there before, not as staff, but as family. The rhythms of this place were already in my body, the way voices lowered at tables, the way service moved without hurry, the way order held even when the room was full. On my first day, Peggy decided to test me. She had been there a long time. Everyone knew it. She asked loud enough for others to hear whether I even knew the difference between a bread plate and a salad plate, whether I could tell a salad fork from a dinner fork without hesitation. I didn't answer her. I set the table correctly. Mammy didn't merely teach me how to set a table. She taught me how to eat at one, at the Grand Hotel, at Arnold's, at Antoine's in New Orleans, places where service was an art and expectations were unspoken. You learned by watching, by paying attention. Leaving the hotel meant crossing back into a different world, sometimes before dawn, sometimes well after dark. I worked a split shift then, which meant riding my bike both ways, twice a day. I arrived at the hotel by 5 a.m. before breakfast service, left around 11:30, returned again by 5, and often didn't leave until 10 or later, sometimes after midnight if there was a banquet. The ride added up quickly. 6 miles each way, over 20 miles a day, on top of the hours on my feet. The streets were quiet at those hours. The risks were visible. Cars, corners, patches of darkness you could see and adjust for. That kind of danger never unsettled me. It announced itself. I had learned quickly how to read the street the way I read the sky, where to slow, where to press, when to keep moving. Even when I was pregnant, I rode my bike until the hotel finally took me off the schedule, afraid I might fall on their property or on the road getting there. What waited beyond the front door at home was always harder to read. I didn't go back to work right away after my son was born. But when my husband quit his job, I ran back to the hotel, back to the place that felt structured, predictable, safe in a way nothing else was. By the time my son turned 1, the circle around us had grown small. He didn't have a party at home. There were no wrapped gifts on the living room floor, no photographs taken by family who had watched him grow from the beginning. Instead, my coworkers threw him a party in the Sky Lounge at the hotel. Someone brought balloons. Chef Parsons baked a cake. Lisa and Paula made sure there were presents, enough that a child would one day know he had been celebrated. They sang to him while the bay stretched out behind the windows. I remembered standing there, holding him, thinking how strange it was that the place where I worked knew how to hold us better than the life I was supposed to be building. Not long after that, my husband insisted we move to Atlanta. I went because resistance took more energy than I had left. But something in me broke there, quietly, completely. I returned to Mobile with my son, but when his father asked for a visit and then disappeared with him, the ground gave way entirely. I went back to the hotel again, not because it could fix anything, but because it was the only place that I had ever steadied me. And then the divorce came, and it came with a silence I didn't recognize at first as freedom. In that hard-won freedom, I reclaimed myself. What that freedom cost and who it touched comes in another story. But that freedom didn't arrive with fireworks. It arrived quietly, the way things do when you stop bracing for impact. I had to return to the Grand Hotel not as someone passing through, but as someone visible again, free to speak, free to linger, free to accept conversations I had once deflected out of necessity. Over the years, men had flirted. I had learned how to deflect that too. But now, without fear, shadowing every exchange, I could tell the difference between noise and presence. I met Al through friends on the water, not in a room, on a yacht tied among others, where introductions were casual and hierarchies mattered less than how someone lived when a line needed tending. Al was the captain of the Kotar 1, owned by the Rusevich family. He didn't announce himself as anything. He didn't posture. He stood confidently in the space he occupied, the way people do when they've spent years answering to wind and tide instead of opinions. What struck me wasn't charm. It was steadiness. Later, he invited me to see his own boat. Seahawk was a 65-foot schooner, older than most people who admired her, and far more honest. She wasn't polished for display. She was lived on, sailed, trusted. Al lived aboard her. I didn't step onto that deck feeling like a guest. I stepped aboard and felt something settle into place. An old familiarity I hadn't named before. The creak of timbers, the rhythm beneath your feet, the understanding that everything on board had a purpose, including me. Life with Al wasn't an escape. It was a continuation. We sailed the Gulf, the Caribbean, days folded into watches, watches into passages. You learn quickly that the sea doesn't care who you used to be. It only responds to what you know and how well you pay attention. And I paid attention. Life aboard didn't announce itself as extraordinary. It simply required attention. You stood watch. You learned the feel of the helm. You learned when to trust the chart and when to trust your hands. We were moored in St. Thomas when Lou and Cliff Cox, friends from Gulfport Yacht Club, tied up nearby. Evenings blurred easily into conversation, meals shared across cockpits, stories traded with tide reckoning beneath us. One night over dinner, Cliff and Al decided they would study for the U.S. Coast Guard 100 gross ton captain's license. Lou and I looked at each other and decided we would too. Not because we had something to prove, because we had already been doing the work. We had stood beside them at the helm, taken watches, helped plot courses and bring boats safely into harbor. We knew the rules because we had lived them. We knew the water because we respected it. Studying it didn't feel like preparation. It felt like naming something that was already true. We took the exams in San Juan, Puerto Rico, 5 modules taken separately, each one demanding precision. When the results came back, Lou and I were among the first 25 women ever issued that license. And I had scored higher than anyone who had tested at San Juan Center before, 98 or better on every module. There was no celebration the way people imagine such things, no victory speech, No moment where the world rearranged itself, just a quiet confirmation. The license finally wrote down what the sea and a little girl already knew. She never doubted it, even when the world tried.
Back home again.
Back on the field.